fact, there's a way that we can assess the purity of our love. So in the movie Flipped, a young Julie Baker has this crush on a guy called Bryce Losky. When she's talking about what she likes about Bryce to her father, she starts naming things like, maybe it's his eyes or his smile. And her father, in response, while he's painting a picture, he starts giving this lesson where he says, when you paint a cow, it's nothing more than a cow. When you paint a tree by itself, it's just a tree. And when you paint a sun, it's just a sun. But when you put it together, you get what he says, magic. You get a beautiful painting, which is more than the sum of its parts. You can point out these certain features, these aspects, but when you look at the big picture, that's where the beauty is. And so what he's trying to tell Julie is that when you have a liking, a desire, a love for someone, you have to look at who they are. At first, Julie Baker didn't really understand this. It wasn't until she started climbing up a sycamore tree. When she would get to the top, she would see this beautiful view where she would see the fields, she would see the trees, the sun. And when you put them all together, the view was just beautiful. And she fell in love with this view that she would every once in a while just climb up this tree and sit there for hours just to enjoy the view. She fell so in love with this view that when the town decided to cut down the tree in order to build a house, while she was up on the tree, she would tell the people who were going to cut it down, you cannot cut this down. There's so much beauty that I can see from this tree that I can't possibly let anyone cut it down. And so she made a whole scene around town. She was actually put in the local newspaper, and she just stayed there on the tree for hours, telling the people not to cut down the tree. It wasn't until her father forced her down that she actually came down. But she was heartbroken when they cut down the tree, because she saw something so beautiful up there, and now it's gone. Before I continue, Flipped is just a wonderful movie. You guys probably look at me and think, this guy probably loves like The Terminator or Rocky IV. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I actually love romance. And Flipped is one of my favorite, if not my favorite movie ever. Definitely my favorite romance. And there's so much to love about it, and I'll get to that. But what I want to do in this video is talk about that one scene I just explained and extract certain philosophical and theological truths that I think can help us with our lives. And so I'll definitely start with the fact that what Julie Baker experienced up on that tree was a profound experience and pure experience of beauty, where she learned that this view isn't just beautiful because it has trees, because it has a field, or because there is a sun, but when you put them all together, you get something that's more than just each individual part put together. You just see something so beautiful. With that experience, she understood what her father was saying with the whole greater than the sum of its parts. And she started to go back and think, okay, I have this crush on Bryce Losky, this guy. Do I like him in the same way as my experience up on that tree? That is a beautiful way to assess our own hearts and our own love for other people. Everyone knows that to love someone has to be beyond what they can do for you, what they've done, or how they look, but it has to be for who they are. In fact, there's a way that we can assess the purity of our love. So we can take something that we love and we can finish the blank, I love X because, and you finish the sentence. Depending on how you finish that sentence, that is going to determine how pure your love is. I can talk about my dog. I love my dog because he makes me laugh whenever he's playing out in the backyard. And sure, I mean, that's something pleasurable. It's nice to see. But what's even more pure than that is I love my dog because of who he is, because he's my dog, because he's, it's just who he is. And, it doesn't only apply to pets, but most especially to our relationships. We know that instead of saying, I love my spouse because she gave me this really nice gift on my birthday, is less pure than if we say something like, I love my spouse because of who she is. That's just common sense. That's what pure love is. And so we can assess our relationships, whether we're loving someone in the best way possible, by seeing how we finish that sentence. I love X because. That is one profound lesson that Julie Baker learned. And like I said, she applied this to her crush for Bryce Losky, assessed that. She didn't really come to any conclusions, but it's just a beautiful assessment of love. Now, Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas from the Middle Ages, has this concept called the transcendentals. And they're basically descriptive words that we assign to God in order to try and encapsulate his nature. We are finite human beings. We cannot fit God's infinite nature into our minds. And so we have to come up with these words to kind of describe who he is. And so we come up with words like good. God is good. God is truth. God is love. But what we're essentially doing is trying to describe God's singular nature. It's just that we can't fathom it, and so we have to pull out these words in order to really understand him in a human way. Some argue that beauty is a transcendental. I think it is. I think it makes sense. To say God is beauty sounds right. What Julie Baker experienced up on that tree, for the Christian, we could say that is an experience of God. To experience a nature that comes from God, beauty, that is a profound experience, and that can change and transform your life. It transformed Julie Baker. It showed her pure love, what it's supposed to look like. And with this encounter, she had to assess her crush for Bryce Losky. She understood that you cannot just pick certain features and say you like that person because of those immediate features that give us gratification. You have to look even deeper. It's almost a paradox. You're looking deeper, but looking deeper brings you out to see the wider scope of things. So when you're looking deeper into the nature of someone's soul, it almost just expands our understanding or our view of the person, because we can see the person for who they actually are. What Julie's father was doing was he was using an analogy of beauty to explain the nature of love. When you look at something beautiful, we know the experience of that beauty becomes more profound whenever we enjoy it for what it is. Apply that to love, and we get a very similar lesson. You have to love someone beyond just their outside appearance or these immediate features of that person, but you have to love the person, if you want to love them more purely, for who they are. This kind of relates to what I said about Aquinas' transcendentals. Explaining beauty is basically explaining love. And both are kind of experiences of what the Christian might say is God. And so it just makes sense that, when Julie Baker learns this great lesson from her father, she becomes transformed. Like I said, we can use this kind of framework to determine how pure our love is, but we also have to apply that with our relationship with God. Do we love God because he is God? I was reading Brothers Karamazov with my great friend. We would read a few pages and we would meet every week. We just met yesterday, actually, just to talk about what we had read. And we came to the topic of how people come to follow God. There's one group who follows God because they're afraid of hell. The other group follows God because they love God. They know who he is and they love it. And so they follow him. or to follow God because you could go to hell if you do bad things, is actually not horrible. I mean, Jesus uses these two themes when he's preaching, but everyone knows that a purer way to follow God is when you love God for who he is. That's kind of like the mentality of all the saints. What was that one Bible verse? Be still and know that I am God. You know, that I think that's how we should base our credence to God, because we love him. And you know, we have to have a healthy sense of fear for God if we want to have a more spiritual, a more fruitful journey with God. It's best to love him because God is God. It's good for us to think about it. Can we say that we love God because he is God? And it's a hard question even for me to ask myself, you know, and when we find that it's not as pure as we thought, you know, we have to start somewhere. And yeah, that's just a beautiful way for us to understand love God, love everyone around us, love ourselves because of who that person or who we are. And so in the eyes of Julie Baker, she fell in love with this beautiful view, and she applied that to her crush for Bryce Losky. If you continued watching the movie, you'll know that Bryce Losky does not like Julie Baker. He finds her as an annoying girl who just follows him around because she likes him. It wasn't until he starts making mistakes, hurts her feelings, and starts to feel bad and tries to apologize, that he slowly begins to see the beauty of Julie Baker's soul. She's not this girl who chases around and tries to get whatever she wants. She is a girl with innocent desires, but who tries to live life to the fullest. Julie Baker fell in love with The View. Bryce Losky fell in love with Julie. Keep watching if you want to know what happens in the end. I don't want to spoil it. I feel like I've spoiled enough already. This is what an encounter with love, with beauty, can do for us. So are we chasing superficial things, worldly things, or are we trying to experience it in a deeper level? The Bible says to keep your mind on the higher things, the things of God, the things that will never change. When you encounter a nice view and you see the beauty in a pure way, you'll know that the nature of that beauty can never be lost, because that is God. But when we're chasing and seeing things from a superficial way, we're missing the beauty because our appreciation for that thing is coming from its immediate gratification that we receive. There's a song, keep your mind on the higher things, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest is love. Keep your mind on the higher things, you know? And so I'm done. Thanks for watching. If you're a good friend of mine, you probably know that I love this movie, Flipped. I love it. So if you want to have a greater sense of true love, watch Flipped. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.